you all to today's research launch on the theme Critical Review of Literature. So, the literature review is often described as the cornerstone of research. While some methodologies may emphasize immediate data collection, for more postgraduate scholars, the journey truly begins with curiosity. An interest sparked by prior exposure to a subject. That curiosity then leads to an exploration of existing literature, which becomes the foundation for building capacity as a researcher. But as we know, reading and summarizing literature alone is not enough. The real transformation of knowledge happens when we critically engage with sources, synthesizing ideas, identifying gaps, and shaping new insights that extend beyond what has already been said. In this process, two elements remain crucial: doing it ethically by adhering to proper referencing conventions and ensuring originality by avoiding plagiarism. So today's discussion will highlight these very dimensions, how a literature review can move from descriptive account to a critical narrative, how proper citation strengthens academic integrity, and how the practice of doing it right ensure that knowledge is transformed meaningfully and responsibly. So with this introduction, let us begin our conversation and explore together how a critical review of literature can shape not only our research project, but also our growth as researchers. So let me introduce today's resource person, Professor Bingunath Ingirige. Bingunath Ingirige is a professor of Urban Resilience and Adaptation of the School of Science, Engineering and Environment, University of Salford, UK. He has a BSc Honours degree in Quantity Surveying obtained from University of Moratuwa, a Masters in Management of Technology from Asian Institute of Technology, Thailand, and a PhD from University of Salford, UK. He is a member of the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveys and a fellow of the Higher Education Academy in UK. Professor Ingirige's main research interest is in study leading to adaptation against climate change. He looks into how future projection of climate change impact on economic sectors and livelihood of people. He has obtained funding from numerous bodies such as UK Research Council. He has also studied collaborative engagement process between agencies, public and private sector, both in the UK and internationally. In another project, he led his team in investigating resilience of small business against extreme weather events. He has also successfully supervised several PhD students, and he has chaired conference presentations and has been part of scientific and organizing committees in many international and UK-based conferences. He has over 100 publications in international journals, conferences, and chapters in books. He has also delivered keynote addresses in conferences. Professor Ingirige is a member of editorial panels in international journals and has also led several special shows in international journals. He also has a passion to improve capabilities and capacities of postgraduate students in many disciplines and has delivered several keynote presentations covering numerous areas of postgraduate research methodology, process, and good practice. So, dear Professor, we warmly welcome you to the research launch. So, Professor, we all know that a literature review is an essential part of any research. But let me pose a questions to begin our discussion. Why is it important to go beyond simple review and move forward a critical review of literature? And how does a critical review differ from a general?
So critical, when you make it a kind of a critical review, that means you are putting yourself into it and you are putting other people into it. So it's like trying to uh, trying to gain insights from not just not just the written materials, but also views of others, arguments, various clashes between various groups. All those things are coming into the discussion, right? That's when it is a kind of a critical review. So that is the whole the main element of my presentation today. And so thanks very much for asking that question, so that I can sort of start off in that kind of position. So that the researchers who are kind of listening to this presentation will have will be looking at it from that point of view. That's very important. Okay, so thanks very much for inviting me to make this presentation today to Morato University, especially to Naini and the team, the Faculty of Graduate Studies. And I'm very happy to see the Dean also present today, this presentation. Yeah, so my presentation, as the title suggests, is about critical review of literature. And, it's about trying to transform knowledge, right? And taking knowledge into another level. And most importantly, while transforming knowledge, how to do it right. Okay, so thing is, lots of people think that literature review is sort of a mechanical process. It's something that happens automatically, right? But what I am trying to say is it is much more than automatic, right? So it has to be something that involves lots of deliberate processes, deliberate strategies being implemented. And there's a very strong human element in the critical review of literature. So the transforming of knowledge is, in our terms, we call it, there are things that are self-propelled. So transforming knowledge via critical review of literature is not self-propelled. It has to be deliberate. That's the main thing which I want to emphasize. Right. Usually when I do a presentation, I have some kind of an abstract picture to start off with, and I don't talk about it initially, but I come to that at the end, right? So just to explain what this is, this is, so this is an island which divides into two countries. So on the left is Haiti. You must have heard about Haiti having earthquake and things like that. Very much connected to my research in disaster risk reduction. And on the right-hand side is Dominican Republic. So both Haiti and Dominican Republic are in the same island. So it's the same terrain. And you can see although you see a line in between, there's no physical line there. It's just that I got a copy from a book. So what you see there is like a kind of the binder of the book. That's the line, but physically there's no line. But you can see that Dominican Republic is green, whereas Haiti is not. So I'll come to that at the end. Right. So I'm going to be looking at what is literature review and potential to transform knowledge. Then I will go a step further into critical thinking and writing. I will just relate very briefly about Canterbury Tales and how that is related to the point that I am trying to make. and also transforming knowledge, and how transforming knowledge in terms of our research is place dependent, right? So we might do the same research with the same kind of same type of sample or the population, but the thing is the place will will change the outcomes, right? So I'll explain that the importance of place in transforming knowledge. Then finally, trying to connect all the dots, which includes referencing, paraphrasing from literature, and avoiding plagiarism. So this is basically some key points of my presentation. So there is initially just want to make sure that everyone is in the same plane with me in terms of some of the terminologies. So we use certain things all the time. Some terminologies like literature search, literature survey, literature review. So these are all different, slightly different terminologies. So literature search or the survey is about gathering the information, right? Or storage of information or information management, right? So it's about trying to search or to try to survey and find some kind of a pattern in literature. But literature review is mainly about trying to do some kind of an appraisal of that literature, right? So they are slightly different terminologies, and it's important to strike a distinction between these terms. So what is critical review? What is literature review? So it's about kind of trying to look at various sources of literature and try to understand the various arguments, theories, and patterns. And the intention is to form a credible theoretical base, right? So if you are doing empirical research, that means research that includes primary data. That means, so you might do interviews, you might do questionnaire surveys, or you might do action research. And if, before doing anything else, you need to kind of find out what is out there at the moment. So that is the literature review. And the outcome that you are expecting to achieve is to form what is known as a credible theoretical base. Right? That's the outcome that you are trying to gain out of a literature review. So let's look at the aims of literature review. Right? So as I said, it's about developing a theoretical base. So the importance is of trying to establish the existing state of the art. Right? In other words, try to find out where everything is at the moment. Right? So it's like so you might have heard the phrase that if you don't know where you are, a map won't help. Okay, so in research, we are trying to go from one place to another, right? So for that, we need to know where we are first, right? So if you don't know where we are, and someone gives you a map to determine where to go, you can't go actually, because you don't know where you are, right? So it's just like that. So if you start research without a proper literature review, it's like starting something without knowing where you are, right? So it's a very important thing to establish where you are, and that is a key aim of literature. So once you gain, what do you mean by gaining the existing state of art? Is to kind of these three things that are mentioned. What is the overall current knowledge, right? So from various sources of literature, what is the overall current knowledge of a particular area that you want to research, and where is it heading? Like, so it's not just to identify the knowledge, but to identify some, so for example, if you are doing master's research or undergraduate research or PhD or whatever, your supervisors will ask, not only ask about the existing knowledge, but they will ask where things are heading at the moment, right? What are the key things to come up in the future? Okay. And also the third one is, who are the experts in this area, right? So all this is part of establishing the state of the art. Okay, so you can say like there are 3 universities who are the leading, who's got leading experts, or these individuals in the world are the leading experts in this field, right? So if you say that, okay, I know the state of the art, you should be able to tell those things as well. So it's very important to get that overall knowledge about literature. No, very briefly, I think we all know about Google. We all know about Google Scholar, but there may be a few things that you may not know, which are very, very important. Okay, so this is the search engine called Google Scholar. It's not the normal Google search, but Google Scholar search. So what Google Scholar search does is that all search outcomes are without the .com websites. Okay, so if you do a search on Google Scholar, it eliminates all the commercial type of search outcomes and leaves you with academic material. Okay, so that's the very important aspect of Google Scholar. And Morato University and other universities, you have, whatever the search results that you get out of Google Scholar, you'll have access to the material that is there. And you can be rest assured that the material that you get have knowledge built up on that. So it's not just a series of series of results. It has intelligence in it as well. That is the importance of Google Scholar search. So this would be one of the important things that you can do in terms of searching for information. So I have, just as an example, I have put 2 search items there from my research: disaster risk management and climate change. So I have put a comma, disaster risk management as one word and climate change as another phrase. Okay, so if you do a search like that, you would come up with such results. Okay, so it is the other things that are part of this research result that is really important. Okay, so in this, if you do a search like that, you get, as mentioned in this one, there are 18,500 results. 18,500 results. Okay, so obviously that you can't handle 18,500 results. You have to narrow down this, right? So there are various ways of narrowing down, and the first is on the time constraining side of it. Okay, so you can see I have put here, I have, which is marked in red. I'm not sure whether you can see, since 2021, right? So since 2021, there are 18,500 results. So if you want more recent search results, you can say since, you can say since 2025, etc. So you could time constrain it, or you could take 2 time blocks. For example, if you want to know articles published between 1990 and 2000, you can get that time block like results like that. Also, you get the number of, so if this is an article that you are choosing for your research, you get how many times it has been cited by others, right? Cited by 84, for example. So some areas of research you might get like cited 550 times, etc. So then you know that that this particular article may be really good because it has been cited by 84 others, etc. And also you can do changes in your search keywords. You can put parentheses, that is inverted commas, to your search terms, and then they are definitely in the in exactly that way in the article. So then you can reduce the number of search items by doing that. So there are so many things that that you can do in Google. So that's the real advantage of it. I would suggest that this, to everyone to use this kind of search. So on the right hand side, it identifies the sources from which you can download the article. So for example, Science Direct, I think, I'm not sure whether Monash University has access to that. So sometimes you have access only to the abstract of articles, and sometimes you have access to the full article. And also there are certain repositories of search, some of the material like ResearchGate, and various other repositories from where you'll be able to request an article, full article, and get it free of charge, and so on. So it is important to get this thing right at the beginning. So what is so all this time I have been talking about literature review, and now I'm kind of trying to talk about synthesis. Synthesis means it's the final comment that you make out of the literature review. Okay, so it provides a current view on the subject area. It demonstrates that you have read and understood the views and research of experts in the field of study. Right. So you are trying to say, you are trying to give your own account of what you have reviewed, and that is called the synthesis of literature review. So it helps develop your research topic, questions, and your hypothesis. It provides a platform from which you can go and conduct your own research, enables you to compare your findings against a theoretical position. Right? So that itself is something really good, right? Literature review and synthesis. So we have looked at literature review and synthesis. So then we go into what then is critical review. Okay. So on that kind of platform, we go further into what is known as critical review. So a research problem always emerges within a context. Okay. So research problem cannot be generic. A research problem is always related to a context. Okay. So if you are doing research in Sri Lanka, that may also be too broad. Where in Sri Lanka are you looking at a kind of a context where there is poverty? Are you looking at a context where there is vulnerability? Okay, so all that is part and parcel of the research problem, right? Are you looking at developing countries, or are you looking at countries which are affected by climate change most? So likewise, so it's always, so we are living in a world where we feel global effects through several local repercussions. That means, like, for example, what it really means is, like, if there's rain constantly, right? At a time when there's no rain, we say, okay, so that's climate change, right? And so we are trying to put, based on our local experiences, we are trying to make determinations of what the global changes are happening at some certain point of time. Okay, and also there are divergent views presented on the same issue, right? So it's not like everyone is agreeing with what you are saying. Okay, there's always divergent of views. Okay, which is really good, right? If everyone agrees with what you are with, then it's not interesting, right? So there should be divergence of views. People see things differently through different lenses, right? They look at it from different, like, it could be your background. For example, you may be someone who is from an economics background. You may be from a sociological background. You may be from an engineering background. You may be from an architectural background. So based on how you are looking at certain things, your views may be different. Okay. And then there's some degree of evidence and judgment, right? And then there's rationality. Okay. And then there's complexity, right? Further, so that means, to what extent do you go in trying to develop your arguments? Okay. So it's like, although it sounds very simple, like critical review, right? Critical review of literature. it involves lots of things that actually together becomes very complex. So it just, I'm really good at, not good actually, I'm really interested in trying to kind of convey messages through various pictures, diagrams, etc. So this is, so are there any civil engineers here? No. Okay. So what is this picture? Kind of some sort of a settlement, right? Some sort of settlement. So now this, for, it's hardly unlikely to have divergent of views in this, like, so everyone knows what the problem is, right? So it's not like someone will say, this is the problem, someone else will say that is the problem, and someone else, another person looking at it from another country will say, no, it's not that. No, so it's highly unlikely to get divergence of views, right? So what we are talking about are complex problems, not problems of this nature. Like now this one looks a little bit more complex. There are challenges on this. What it means is, like, you can see, so this is something, you can say that the whole system is in equilibrium at this particular moment, right? But you can see that why it is in equilibrium is because of the various, I can say, like, civil engineering structure that is there. So you get post-tension wires holding various things, right? And if something snaps, so if any of these wires snap, something will collapse. Okay, so it is in equilibrium because everything has been designed properly and everything is staying in its place and everything is in equilibrium, right? But so there can be divergent of views here, like, if someone asks, okay, if this wire that I'm pointing, if this wire snaps, what's going to happen? Which is the one that's going to collapse, and so on, right? So people will have difference of views on that. But this looks much more complex than the previous one. So likewise, the complexity can differ from one to the other, right? So there can be multiple ways of gaining gaining the views of various sources, right? This particular picture shows about mass media, different types of media, and on the same thing, right? On the same kind of event, you get to hear from various sources, right? So there are multiple ways of gathering evidence. So when you're trying to gather evidence, you get from radio, TV, various media, news. In our case, from journal articles, various journal articles, magazines, etc. So it is important to gain multiple perspectives from different sources. Okay, so when you are writing a piece of writing an article, you have to have multiple sources. That means it's not good to have just the journal articles. You have to have other things as well. Maybe something from a newspaper, something from a magazine, right? Something from an interview. Likewise, it is important to gain from various sources. If you try to get things only from scientific literature, that may not present the correct picture, right? It's important to gain multiple perspectives. But the thing is, how far do you go? Okay, because when you are doing some research, you have time scale. Okay, you shouldn't forget about that time scale by reading, looking into various things, and so you have to have a deadline and you have to have a time scale, right? And you'll come across various types of issues which may not be relevant, as you can see: cloning, air pollution, Marxism, capitalism. So are you going to look at all these things, right? So that you have to have a kind of a boundary, right? You have to have a boundary. So as much as something is complex, it is up to the researcher to dictate what sort of a boundary you are going to go, right? which is very important. So what is critical thinking? It involves cognitive activity. So when you are collecting things from multiple sources, right, there's cognition involved. Cognition means like, trying to balance various arguments, trying to think yourself. So it's not you're not going to report what others are saying. You are going to report what you think of what others are saying. Right? So that's the cognitive activity, right? Learning to think in critically and analytical and evaluative ways, right? So the mental processes involved in that is like, you need attention. You have to develop the ability to categorize various things, like, you need to put them into boxes to say, this is the political view, this is the economic view, this is, likewise, you need to categorize them. And then you need to select accordingly. And that all goes into your judgment finally, right? And that's when your critical thinking piece or critical writing piece comes as a result of that. All right. Right. So what are the barriers? So that is also very important to understand. What are the barriers into critical writing, critical thinking? Sometimes being personal, like, so for example, if you have very strong views over a certain subject, right, that might be a barrier. You need to be a balanced person, right? And you can't be emotional. So for example, if you are an individual who has faced poverty, right? If you are coming, then, and your research is on poverty alleviation or something, right? You might have problems in trying to do a balanced judgment. You might already have determined what the answer is, when you start something, and that may be a barrier. Okay, so it is important to be non-emotional, non-personal. Somehow it might be difficult, but that is important. Inability to reason. Sometimes you might have problems in reasoning, right? That, but all these problems can be alleviated. You can try to develop skills. That's why I say, like, I try to build skills and capabilities of researchers who have some of these problems. It is sometimes it's easy because when students come to see me and at the start of the research, I can understand what some of the problems are, because I can see someone coming to me and saying, okay, I know the answers. The problem in this research is this, and this is the problem. I say, no, you haven't still started the research, So you need to kind of think rationally in that way. And inability to reflect skeptically. That means that skepticism is also important. That means, sometimes you might actually interview, or you might read. So we haven't come to the interview stage. It's still literature review. So at the literature review, you might read something that is heavily political, right? So you need to be really skeptic, right? Because what you are trying to do is non-political. Okay, and you might have to read something really political, right? And then you have to deal with it very skeptical. You need to get the essence out of it, right? And in a balanced way. And sometimes some people might have some kind of an issue with regard to structuring in mind, right? That might also be an issue for some people, and that also might constrain. So it is important to be mindful of some of these issues.
Yes. I have a question. Do you believe a literature review should mainly inform us of what is known, or push to discover what is still unknown? Then with this series?
Yeah, that's a very important question. It is so what we are doing literature review with what is already there, right? But we should be in a position to kind of identify the unknowns, right? So when you are talking about a research problem, the research problem means you are putting your arguments in doing a certain research in a certain direction. So in other words, you are trying to kind of say that there is a gap somewhere that needs investigation. That, so the whole idea of literature review is to kind of identify that gap. So there is some gap which needs further investigation, right? And that could be the unknown that you are trying to identify. And then you deploy the various mechanisms, like you can interview certain groups, you can do focus groups, you can do action research, and the idea is to cover that gap. Yeah. So yeah, that's probably the thing. And how to get there is to think critically. Yeah. Yes.
Highlight gap. Yeah. Can we highlight the technological gaps likewise?
Yes.
Is there any specific method, maybe methodological gaps, maybe country-related gaps, maybe some other gaps?
Yes.
How can we?
Yeah. So the critical thinking, critical review, critical writing applies to every part of your research, including the methodology, right? And so the gaps can be part of the methodology as well, right? So one, you can say, when after the literature review, you have done, you have looked at all these methodologies. However, most of the, this particular research has been done based on a very narrow methodological scope, right? And it is important to look at it in broad terms, right? And that could be the gap in methodological terms. Okay, so I'm going to identify that later in a few moments. I'm going to show you that critical review in your research is applicable to not the initial part of the research, but everywhere, right? So once you collect primary data, again, you have to critically review, right? Or critically write from the data that you have collected. So that applies throughout the research as well, but very much in the initial stages. Yeah, so this is the thing, looking at the same object through different eyes. Okay, so and this is the key part of it. Okay, so it's the same object, but people looking at it from different perspectives have different views on it. Okay, and which is quite natural. There's nothing wrong in it. So you can't say, why is this person saying this about it? That's how they see it. Okay, that's the way it goes. Okay, and to this, I bring this particular aspect, Canterbury Tales. I don't know how many of you have heard, how many of you have seen this book. So this is something that was written 600 years ago, and it's an incomplete work. It has various versions, and the original version is very difficult to understand. It's not written in the present day English. It's written in English 600 years ago. So in the original version, it's very difficult to understand, but there are later versions of it written properly, called Canterbury Tales. So I've taken this example just to explain that same point. So what happened in this was, more than 30 people met by chance at an inn in London. Okay, so that's the background of the story. And then they were all sent on a pilgrimage to visit the shrine of Thomas Becket in Canterbury Cathedral. So there's a thing called Canterbury Cathedral. Okay, so they were different people, like some were merchants, some were servants, some were, right, people of different caliber met in this inn, and they were told to go and visit the shrine of Thomas Becket, right? And then they came back and told their story, what they saw, right? All the, more than 30 people, they went away and came back and told the story. So it is really interesting how, so this particular book is those stories, collection of those stories, how they related it, right? It's the same thing, same place they went, right? And some of the tales closely and convincingly match their tellers. Okay, so all these old people like the merchant, the physician, the yeoman, the monk, etc. So when they said something, it related to what they are doing, their business or their upbringing, or what they valued. Their tales match closely to their tellers, and then sometimes match rivalry between the characters. So they said, this person might have thought like that, but this is what I am thinking, right? Yeah. So likewise, they compared each other without knowing what others are saying about it, right? So and stories can be read in isolation as self-contained narratives, but much is lost by taking them out of the context. Okay, so you can like read things in abstract, then you don't get that meaning. You need to kind of think, okay, this was told by the monk, right? This was told by the monk. The monk he lives in this kind of environment, and as a result, this may have been the reason why he said this. So we need to connect up with the context, right? So that this is really important, like in trying to critique. Okay. Similarly, like some topic lots of people talk about these days about tax, right? Multiple views on the same subject, but how do you develop a coherent argument, right? So different people say different things like about the same thing, like tax. I don't have to think about tax. What do I get out of tax, etc., etc. So depending on your context, you would have different views. So critical thinking involves a justification of beliefs. Okay, so you can't say something without justification, right? So that is why you have the referencing. When you are critically reviewing something, you are not saying things out of thin air. You don't pluck things out of thin air and say it, right? You say a particular statement which you have read somewhere and you are referencing it. You are saying it in your own words, which is called paraphrasing, and then you have to reference that because it's someone else's idea, right? So that's the justification, right? And argumentation is the vehicle by which justification is offered. Okay, so that's the basis where justification is offered. Argument is not violent disagreement. Okay, so that is when different people have their own positions and you violently disagree something. So from the start, no, this is, so that's not. It has to be balanced. It has to be balanced, right? For and against, and then based on the balance of evidence, you say that it is like that. It may not be your original position. It may have changed. It is just a trail of reasoning in which claims and supporting reasons are linked to establish a position, right? So it's like, so you have to have a trail of reasoning, right? So it's like to say, like certain things, you might have read various articles where they progressively argue on something and finally coming out with the justification, right? Initially, they say, okay, so I'm going to justify this particular part of it. Then they justify that particular part of it. And finally, the whole thing, likewise. Yeah. Any question?
Searching for the literature people. So is it the must kind of go for the academically published terms? Like otherwise, aren't you kind of getting an opinion, like if they're kind of go to like other sources, which are kind of not scientifically.
Yeah. So yes, that's a very important question actually. So not academic ones are really important, right? Because what your research is academic, right? Therefore academic, but you have to gain perspectives from non-academic ones as well. Like for example, a newspaper article, magazine article. So if you're based on your area, like if I'm from built environment, we have magazines published by RICS, which is the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors. Professional bodies, they publish various magazines. They are also very important. That have some very strong professional knowledge, which you may not find in academic literature. But you have to have knowledge coming from different sources.
So, that in our literature,
yeah, you do. But so you include that in your critical review, right? Because if something is like now if you look at Wikipedia, right? So Wikipedia academically we say it's not a very good source, right? Academically, because why? It's
Anyone can change.
Anyone can change. I can put a certain opinion piece and put it there, and someone can look at it and put it in the research. Then it's all flawed, isn't it? So that's why, but Wikipedia can be used to find various avenues, right? That's what I use Wikipedia for. So I don't judge myself based on Wikipedia, but I use it as a source to identify various other sources. Yeah, so that will be an avenue. So the answer to your question once again, it's you need to have multiple sources of literature. But mainly academic. Okay. So, and you should be able to, because you asked the question about methodology. So you should be able to critique the methodology by which they have said certain things. Like, for example, the academic articles, you might have statistical justification of various things. Whereas if you read a newspaper, that could be an opinion. Right? So it's not tried and tested. So in your discussion, in your critical discussion, you can compare the two methodologically. This academic piece comes from like 120 questionnaires, right? Whereas this one is opinion of 2 people, right? And so you are comparing the two, but you are being mindful of the information that you are taking in for the comparison. Okay. Yeah, so this actually, I don't want to go through the whole bullet points here. So this is like a process, critical thinking as a process, right? So identifying other people's positions, arguments, conclusions, evaluating the evidence, weighing up the argument. So this gives a kind of A to Z of critical thinking, right? What do you do at the beginning, and finally you are presenting a point of view in a structured, clear, concise, and well-reasoned way. Okay, that it sort of covers the whole lot. So we have been talking about respective multiple viewpoints. Okay, so so whilst you satisfy, because critical thinking means multiple viewpoints. Okay, whilst respecting multiple viewpoints, you need to be realistic, right? Just because someone says something, you shouldn't accept it, right? So that's why you need to interrogate it, right? And then come up with a clear judgment, clear reasoning out of it, right? And just so whilst you respect someone's point, you can't be taking everything everyone says. Okay, so that's why and sometimes when some of my researchers kind of do an interview, they change their interview questions based on the interview. So I always say, whilst you respect multiple views, right, you mustn't you have to hold on your position. Okay, just because someone says, well, this is not a very good research, this is the best research, you do this, you shouldn't change your research based on someone else is, because when you have come up with your research aim and objectives, they should be fixed. You shouldn't change your aim and objectives based on the interviews that you do. Okay, right. But do we believe everything that someone says? So if someone says some certain thing, do we believe that? Right? So that's why the scientific literature is much more it's more credible in terms of the evidence that is there, because it's been peer reviewed. All the journal articles that you read are peer reviewed, so they are more credible in that sense. But if you read a newspaper article, that's not peer reviewed. It's someone's opinion about something, so it's not peer reviewed, but it has some information, right? A newspaper article or like Economist magazine or something like that. These are very good sources. So to answer your question, like Panchali, you may ask this question: where does critical thinking apply in your research? So it's everywhere, right? So there's critical thinking in introduction and rationale, literature review, methodology, analysis and discussion, and conclusion. So critical review and writing, critical thinking, everything, it's throughout the research. Okay. So the message is that once you get used to the critical thinking, critical writing, you can have that everywhere in your research. Okay. So the main research question may be wide-ranging through the specific consequences that we are investigating. Is very, very local and culturally bound. Therefore, the broad issue or the cause and the local issues and consequences are both important and should be effectively captured. Right. So the thing is, your main investigation could be a very locally based research question. Right. You may be looking at garment factories in Moratuwa, for example. But that doesn't mean that all your literature is about garment factories in Moratuwa. It could be all over the world, right? So when you are taking literature from all over the world, you need to relate it to your local context. Yeah. So you need to, if you are reading an article written on the same subject, an international article in another country, then you need to kind of say, okay, so in that country, it would have been completely different, right? So when the tsunami hit Sri Lanka, there were lots of funding. The problem that Sri Lanka had at that moment was not lack of funding, but funding that came from international organization that the government couldn't manage, right? It was so high of magnitude, and so they had to come up with various quick solutions to relocate the people. And then one of the solutions that they considered was apartments, because then they could identify a safe place to build the apartments and put the people in. But what they forgot was the livelihoods of people and the culture, right? It's like, so the apartment-based solution is there in lots of countries. Like, for example, in countries where there are high earthquake risks, like Iran, most of the people live in that kind of context, and Brazil, and countries where there's high earthquake risk, they build them using various high specification building codes and resistance to earthquakes, and put all the people into those buildings. And that solution doesn't work in Sri Lanka, right? So things like that. So it is important to kind of come with this argument initially, like, when you are doing the main research question arguments. So in the introduction and rationale, in developing your introduction and rationale in your research, you can use critical thinking to situate the study. What does the broader literature suggest? Either from the general view to the specific view, or from the specific to the general view, right? You need to go, so if your study is about the garment factories in general, then you need to identify the specific cases and go from the specific to the general. If it is if your research is mainly focused locally, then from the general to the local context. So whatever way, you need to move between from one to the other. Then in coming up or justifying the aim objective research questions, again, you have to use critical review for that. So literature review has a main element of critical review. Okay. So the idea is finally coming up with a progressive synthesis, and you will be using lots of citations to literature in text and a reference list, and also mixing them with your own positions and views. Okay, that's that. So all that together is the critical review. The methodology also has lots of elements of critical review. So what sort of assumptions or undertakings do you bring at the start of your research, right? So at the start of your research, you might want to say that I'm an engineer. However, I'm looking into human relations, right? So any engineer who has been doing engineering work over a period of time will have problems in looking at it from a human relations point of view, because throughout the engineer's life, you have been looking at machines, right? But now your role is to identify improving productivity among the workforce or something like that. So then you have to look at it in a different lens, right? And that kind of thing can be brought into your methodology. Okay, so someone who's there are various philosophical positions that are part of the methodology. So so there can be philosophical clashes, and in a research you identify those clashes and try to put your own view into it. So as a researcher, what assumptions or undertakings do you do? To what extent are they shaped or influenced? And what context is the research? What context is the research undertaken? What has previous researchers said about the research area? Can you question them, disagree with them, or are you agreeable with them? Right? How is your approach different or unique? And various practicalities, timescales, funding, barriers, etc., and the risks and ethics. Okay, so these are a whole host of issues that are, so that you need to engage with in your methodology, right? And that's again is a critical review. Then the analysis, discussion, and the conclusion. Okay, so that as we discussed earlier, you need critical thinking for if you are doing a cross-case analysis or cross-analysis or something like that, comparing primary data analysis with literature findings and questioning the results. All that is critique. Discussing the findings, bringing your own opinions, reasoning, judgment. Yeah. So when I say own opinion, some students think that the research can be all with own opinions. It's not like that, right? So own opinions is supplemented by the cited references, right? So all the evidence that you collect out of literature is cited, right? And then based on that, you bring your own opinions also into that. And then, identifying the limitations of your research, okay? And what sort of limitations you have been having, and your outcomes are related to those limitations sometimes. Linked to the conclusion, recommendations, and critical thinking, reasoning in relation to results from a specific context to a more wider general context. Okay, so you might, in generalizing your results further, you might use critical research. Okay, so that's my mainstream presentation. Okay, but now I want to sort of do a little bit of connecting the dots. Okay, to go the full cycle. Right? So what do we have? Practicalities. So So this is a capability that you need to develop in trying to review articles. Okay. So maybe, if you get hold of a journal article, you need to first of all skim read its abstract and the whole article. So very quickly identify similarities with other material that you have read. Okay. So maybe you can take a highlighter and highlight some other things that you think, okay, so I saw this particular argument in another paper, so I can remember that. And so likewise, common issues, patterns. So these things can be done with a skim read. Okay, skim. So you don't read from beginning till the end, because there's a bit of a risk, because you might read even if you read 50%, it's a waste of time if it is not related to your article, right? When you skim read and identify various patterns and things like that, then it's something that you will have to read in detail, right? So outline the criticisms they are making connections between those ideas, develop various themes to structure your review, collect quotations and paraphrase material correctly, reference material. So there are these two things of quoting and paraphrasing. So most of the time, like I would say 95% of the time, you would be writing things in your own words after reading, from article. Quoting are reserved for some of the very seminal quotations, or something that is significant. You put them as a quotation. Okay. So your article should not have many such quotations, or your thesis, your dissertation should not have many quotations, because then someone might ask, where is your input? Because you have quoted things too many times, and if your research is with too many quotations, then it's just doesn't make sense. Okay. Yeah. So in terms of the reading, so you have to, in being practical, you identify the reasons and conclusions are drawn out of that, evaluating the quality of evidence that are used in the reasoning. Then you consider there may be certain flaws, certain flaws and limitations in that reasoning, and consider what works well and why. So that means, so if you read an article written in another country, you might think at the start that this might not work in Sri Lanka, because your study is in Sri Lanka. But still, you need to bring that up in your review, right? So, I mean, I encounter this every year when I start supervising master's dissertations. That they want to do a research in their own country, but then they say they don't have literature in their own country. So I always say it's a good thing, right? If you are doing some research in a particular context where there aren't any articles, it's very good, because no one has researched that in your particular context. But that doesn't mean that you don't read anything because there are no articles in your own place, right? That means, why I say good is because it's an opportunity for you to read international art, and then to argue that they are not suitable. Yeah, that is the critique. Yeah. So the important thing is putting yourself into the arguments based on your experience to a certain extent, right? So you can bring your experience also into it. Okay. So if you are supervising someone from the industry, right? It's a really good thing, because you don't try to put the academic element into that person. You try to gain from that person's experience, right? That's really important. So does this challenge or confirm my preconceptions? So that again can be critique. How does this affect my research? What other texts confirm their claims or my experience? It's very important. Okay. Right. So so in my presentation, I thought it's not complete if I not talk about plagiarism, right? So this is a hot topic about plagiarism because of this use of AI in academic work. So I'm not going to talk about AI because that's a separate area and I'm not an expert in that. So what means, I mean, you all know what this is. So repeating another's words or sentences as your own. So if, so that can be both deliberate or innocent. You might do it deliberately, writing someone's ideas or arguments as yours, but you might do it innocently. Like that means you might have forgotten to cite reference, but someone looking at it will not have two opinions about it. You will not say, okay, this person may be innocent. No, right? The assumption is if you don't acknowledge someone's views with a reference, then you are in trouble. Okay, so paraphrasing someone else's argument as your own. So even if you paraphrase, that means write something in your own words, still you need to reference. You need to cite as a reference. Presenting someone else's line of thinking as though it was your own. So even you can't bring in someone's line of thinking as well without reference. Okay. Well, of course, the other things like a visual copy of the same thing, your version or adaptation, or your description of original material. So, like for example, if you are bringing in a diagram from somewhere, right? You need to put a reference. If you have adjusted that diagram, then you need to say adapted from. Okay, it's important to recognize these things. So it could be a kind of a table of statistics, like drawings, pictures, anything you need to reference. So Naini sent me the link to Moratuwa University regulations. So it refers to the regulations, and so plagiarism may be intentional or unintentional. So under the regulations for examinations, plagiarism is a disciplinary offense. I'm not sure what the punishment is, but it's so at my university in UK, I think master's students, it can be from repeating the whole year to expulsion, right? Must be, I think expulsion is a repeat offense, I think, something like that. So, and you can look at, I think the Moratuwa University refers to plagiarism.org for more information on that. Right, referencing. So referencing is the getaway clause for plagiarism. So you risk committing plagiarism by not acknowledging. Okay, so that's when you reference. So referencing is a process as well as adhering to the styles. Right. So the styles are determined by various institutions. So Moratuwa University also adheres to the same convention as Salford University, which is APA 7th. APA 7 style is Moratuwa University style as well, and our university also. But when it comes to journals, they have their own styles. So you need to adhere to articles. When you're writing journal articles, you need to adhere to their styles. And referencing quotes, citations within the body of your work, as well as listing the full reference details in your list of reference at the end of your work. So referencing means both the citing and the reference list, both. So there's this thing called bibliography. There's a slight distinction between references and bibliography. Bibliography means you can reference things which you haven't cited. If you have read a book, but you haven't used it for the citation, then that's considered as bibliography. Okay, so that's a slight distinction there. Referencing does not just apply to direct quotes. So a lot of people think if you quote something directly, then you need to refer, but not otherwise. No, you need to refer even if it is line of thinking of someone. right? Yeah, you always need to acknowledge the source from obtain the material. Yeah, so paraphrasing is what you do most of the time, altering the phrasing of something or changing the way it is written. Okay, if you paraphrase what someone had said or written, you express it differently. Okay, the intention of paraphrasing is to make something clearer or more succinct or expand on the idea. Okay, that's the idea of paraphrasing. Then paraphrasers should be acknowledged through referencing. That's very important. Okay. Right. So I have just a caveat here. So what is written there doesn't make sense. So don't read. But what I have asked is take a look at these two pieces of critical review essays. What are the striking dissimilarities? Not the similarities, but dissimilarities. What strikes you most in the two, the left and the right?
On the left, there's a proper synthesis with many citations.
Uh-huh.
On the right, it's just like, it looks like a person who just used one paper to write that much.
One paragraph is on one.
Wonderful, whole paragraph with one reference, isn't it? Yeah, so when you're citing literature, it is important that you cite where the idea has been written or where the paraphrasing thing has been done, right? You should, there's no, so a lot of people think that, just to cover yourself, you got some idea from somewhere in this paragraph is an idea. So to cover yourself, you put the reference at the end of the paragraph. That's not correct, right? So wherever you've taken the idea, you need to put that reference where, within that paragraph. Okay. So this is the thing, like, so as a supervisor, this is how I see it. Okay. So if on the one on the left-hand side, so there's one idea which is cited Greg et al. 2008. Then there's another idea, Stevenson and Wood, 2017. Then there's a third idea, Smith, 2005, and then it says in order to achieve, and so that could be some more. So you are mixed with three kind of ideas and brought out your own opinion. In the second paragraph of the left one, again there are two ideas in the initial sentence cited, but then there's a long opinion at the end, right? So that is the correct way of critical writing. Right? So you base your evidence on something and then come mixing your own opinions. On the right hand, the one on the right hand side, if I were to look at it mechanically, right? So there is one very big idea and Smith. Then the second paragraph, another idea and Ruddock. And then the third one, another idea and a reference. So as a supervisor of a dissertation, my question is, where's your input into this? Right? It's only three references and your input is missing. Okay? So the way we want critical review is the one on the left. That's the style we want. Right? So lots of people tell me like, it takes very little time for me to mark a dissertation. So my first thing is I'm going to look at this style. Like if the style is like that, right? Then I develop my preconceived idea that this is a good one. If I see that, then I think, this has this, right? So I need to be careful. So, it's not very good. Okay. Yeah, that's just so I just want to strike a distinction between the two. Yeah. Okay, so in conclusion, so critical thinking as a philosophy can be applied anywhere in your research, but it is important that so a lot of effort has to be put in. Nothing comes automatically. It's not like taking 3 journal articles and copying and pasting and okay, you've done the review. It's not as simple as that. Right? A lot of effort goes into this. It is about questioning, reasoning, respecting, justifying, and then developing a coherent argument throughout the thing. It is what keeps the research clock ticking. So let's do it right. Okay, so with that, I conclude. So I come back to this. So this, why Dominican Republic is green and Haiti is not is because of the proper strategies have been adopted, right? So there's deliberate strategies have been adopted in terms of conservation, in terms of sustainability, all those things have gone into this. Because thing is, it is the same weather pattern affecting both sides. It's the same island. Okay, you can't say that it rains only on the right hand side, not on the left hand. So it's the same weather pattern, right? But one side is so it's like if you when there are natural weather patterns, you have to build your own strategies and implement them, right? So similarly, when it comes to critical review of literature, it is your skill to critique, not it's not dictated by the availability of articles, right? So no one can argue by saying my critical review isn't good because there aren't any articles. No, right? With whatever the number of articles that are there, your critical review can be written the best way. Okay, so with that, I'll conclude. Thank you.
Okay. With those points in mind, I'd like to open the floor questions and reflection from the audience, the researchers. Time to you.
So I have two questions.
Yes.
One is, as researchers, how can we reduce the researcher bias while in literature during your paraphrasing, as well as you said, when we put our own understanding to the methodology? That's question number one. The other question is based on what you just showed. So in literature, we mostly have a very synthesized argument from our sources, and then we include our own understanding of it, like a conclusive input. Because in literature, you can't really put almost all your ideas. There's a limitation of that, right? So what would you say when you're critically reviewing? What would be the best way to do that? Like how much of our input versus how much of the input we got from journals and other sources?
Yeah, very good. I think both questions are quite similar, isn't it? The one is how to avoid the researcher bias. Yeah. So the second one is also like how to avoid.
Much do we put in?
Yeah.
Versus
Yeah. Okay. So in the thing is this. So if you have multiple sources taken into consideration, right? And your critical review comes from those multiple sources. And in the end, if you are being biased by putting your own thing despite those multiple evidence, then it would be very clear. Your biasness would be very, very clear. It can be picked out. It's like saying, yes, so many people are arguing that this is like that, this is like that, and then finally you say, no, it's like that. Then the bias can be very clearly identified. I can remember I review lots of journal articles, and there was a particular journal had an article on flood risk. Written by there were 4 authors. All 4 authors were from computer science. They didn't have any background on flood risk. So from the moment I read the discussion and the conclusions, I immediately came to the conclusion that they had no idea at all about flooding and flood risk. Right? So it has been kind of mechanically written. So things like that. So very, very easily you can when you read, you can identify if there's a bias in that. So your second question is about how much of your input can go in. I think any amount of your input can go in. So it is, I mentioned the word skepticism, right? So for example, if you are reviewing literature on the political side, then you have to read all politics, right? So whichever the left wing or the right wing or whatever the politics, you have to read, and you have to get the input from both sides or multiple sides. You have to get their views. But then you can adopt the skepticism to put your twist in, because you can say that the whole scope of the work is to achieve this. Hence, these arguments cannot be taken into consideration, right? Because you have been given a task to do. There's a scope, right? So the scope is to disburse funding. It could be like that, right? So if you take this particular very extreme view, you can't do that, right? So in order to achieve the task, this particular view cannot be taken into, so you can eliminate that. Yeah. Good. Yes.
No.
Yeah. 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 So that's a very good question. Yeah. So I didn't talk about systematic review because that can be considered as a separate methodology, right? A systematic review of literature. So there are many ways of doing systematic review of literature. That is a separate that is a scientific review of literature, right? So then after conducting the various steps of the scientific literature review, systematic literature review, what you do next is again a critical review of literature. So you can take some of those things into account and do the critical review of literature.
And we, okay, stop at a systematic review. Does the physical review give us a better?
Yeah, so part of the systematic review, because so part of the scientific method is to identify the sources. Because it's a screening process. So in the screening, you start off with like 1,200 articles, but you narrow down and come to like 50 or something like that. So with the 50, you are doing a critical review. That is also part of the systematic review of literature. But what the systematic review means is about the screening and then the critical review. Yeah.
Other so like we might study and we just get digital tools that are being used in the industry. So I have like a journal article that we use.
Yes. So systematic review of literature, usually it takes only journal articles, but with various with databases. Yeah.
In that case, that should be
that can be done after the systematic review of literature, if necessary. Yeah. I mean, if your area doesn't require looking at other sources, but only literature or only scientific literature, then you don't have to. So this is the thing. Like when it comes to medical research is always based on scientific material. So that's why, if you are from is there anyone from medical? No. So if you are from if you are a researcher from a medical school, your citations are very high because everyone else cites your work, and most of the material. So the articles that are used for journals in medicine are 100% scientific. They don't. There's no in their field. There's no like magazines and things like that, right? Even some of the magazines are very high profile ones. Yeah, they're all scientific. So it depends on the field. Yeah.
Yeah, specifically drafting journals, if we like come up with the small structure very beginning,
Yeah.
and if we like include all the literature evidences according to our structure, will it be still biased? Like, for example, if I am structuring my introduction part, before it start, maybe after having some sort of an idea of the code of papers that we have selected for the review, and then if we like have a small draft, maybe a flow of writing.
Yeah.
Then we include all the facts from the literature and then build up the argument.
Yeah.
Will be still biased?
No. That's not what biasness is. So you structuring a paper is perfectly all right, and because you have this thing called scope, right? So you would be structuring it based on the scope, right? What biasness comes if you try to twist the message the way so the message twisting can be very easily understood, right? So if you don't try to twist the message, then it's fine, right? That's when it's biased, because you can be skeptic. That's what I said. There's a degree of skepticism. Degree of skepticism is okay. That means you carefully structure the paper in a way that it fulfills the journal requirements, and also there's a strong argument, but you are still not biased.
So how do we like dispel our inner biases when we are reading, and also especially when you're analyzing? Because methodology is where you put in most of our input, right?
Yeah.
So,
So yes, so you need to take yourself out of it. Yeah, that's why I gave an example earlier. Like, if you're sorry, no, not that. I said, like, if your research is on poverty alleviation or poverty studies or something like that, and if you have yourself have experienced poverty in your early life, right? And then like what are the problems you had, and how what sort of a society you lived, and how the society marginalized you. You have personal experiences, and when you are writing your critique, those experiences might come, which might be biased, right? So then you need to take yourself out and try to see, like, maybe the conditions are now different. Okay. Sorry? Rationalize it, yeah. Rationalize it.
Professor, there are several questions in chat line.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Predatory publishing is becoming a trick. So how could we affect critical review?
Sorry, I didn't get it.
Predatory publishing is becoming threat. Then how could it affect critical review?
Can I know who was asking that question?
Tushar.
In what to do?
Yes.
Yeah, so there isn't a solution to that yet. So myself and all that I associate with, I have advice. I mean, we don't still know for sure which journals are involved in predatory publishing. But in our own fields, we have certain articles. So we don't publish in those journals, which we consider as predatory publishing. But that's not conclusive. It's not like on the internet you find names of journals which are considered as predatory publishers. But it's not like a conclusive reason.
The next, Professor, when providing in-text citation, should we cite the original source of funding or the article in which we encountered the information?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Yeah. So usually it's the one that you read that you should cite. But if it's, for example, in this area of knowledge management, the seminal authors are Nonaka and Takuchi, right? So if you read some very recent article about knowledge management and you cite Nonaka and Takuchi is one that you have seen in another text, that may not look good. So when there is seminal pieces of work that you are citing, you need to cite the original source, right? But having said that, if you look at Toyota production line, I can't remember the author, and that particular text is not available anymore anywhere. So it's not available in our library. It's not available to purchase. It's not available so you can't get hold of that original book on Toyota production lines. So there you have to take the best book or article that cites the Toyota theories. But wherever possible, if it's seminal work, then you have to cite the original source. But the general rule is you need to cite the book or the article that you read.
In that case, so if we are like reading someone else's idea from a journal, so you have to go to that specific in-text citation and refer that original source.
If you can, yeah. If you can, you can, but there's no need. You can cite the article that you read. Unless it's a seminal work, like a groundbreaking idea or something like that, then you need to look at the original works.
Next question. Thank you so much, Professor. It was a great presentation. My question is, when I'm reading papers, I noticed that majority of the related papers were conference papers. There are limited peer-reviewed articles. In that case, is that okay to cite those conference papers?
Yeah, so, thing is this, as I said, your literature review should have multiple sources, right? So I would say not, just to cite conference papers is not enough. But you can cite conference papers in addition to the journal articles, right?
And then next, thank you very much, sir. Would it be appropriate to refer to new sources? They can sometimes highlight gaps in existing systems when those systems fail to function effectively, which literature does not reveal.
Okay. So I think generally it is the best thing to do is to cite new work, right? So that's why I highlighted the importance of Google Scholar search. So if you do a Google Scholar search, what comes on top are the new ones, right? But you can change the order in which they come as well. You can make Google Scholar search results to come as highest cited to lower cited papers, or you can have the recent ones coming first. So usually the recent ones should be cited because they tend to reveal the latest technology. Yeah.
Yeah, very good. So this session is really valuable and thank you. My question is possible to add website as the references or online sources as my reference?
Yeah. So website references are possible. So if you read like depending on so if it's Moratuwa University, you follow the APA 7th. So APA 7th style has a website referencing style as well. So website references are possible, but for academic work, websites such as like blogs, so Wikipedia is a blog type of a high-profile blog. So that's why we say not to cite that. But if you want to cite a kind of a case study or something that is on the website, then you can put a website reference. But if your article has only website references, then it's not very good. So among the not after, but within the site, the sources of references, you can have website references.
Thank you for the discussion, Professor. Yeah, if we want to select 3 main article papers for a research pitch, what is the process that we can use to select the best 3 papers for my research domain?
Well, it depends on how you define best. So best, if you mean the recent ones, then maybe the first 3 on Google Scholar would be the recent. If by best you mean highest quality, then it's perceptual. Like you can go by the journals that they have published, and so on. So it's up to you actually.
Yeah.
Professor, can we do non-systematic review by identifying key articles and mining their references to find more relevant studies given the limited literature? How it affect in publishing a review journal article?
Yeah, that's possible. Yeah. So you don't necessarily have to do a systematic review of literature. You can do a normal literature. So what you are saying is the literature way of snowballing, isn't it? So snowballing technique is usually from the key informants, you find other informants if you are doing interviews. But in the review of literature, you can identify further sources from one source. Yeah, so there's no harm in doing that. Only thing is, you might, if you just constrain yourself to that kind of search, then you might not get the full picture, right? So for example, particularly in economics, there are always 2 schools of thought, right? The monetary and the and the other taxation policies and the monetary policies, etc. So when there are sort of highly polarized views, and if you select an article from one view and go on selecting further references from the same type of view, then you are biased on the number of views, right? So maybe whilst doing that, you also have to look at other articles as well.
Okay. That's all.
That's it.
Okay. Okay, so as we conclude today's discussion, so I hope this session
Professor.
has no. I think that's
Yeah,
questions from audience.
Professor. Yeah, I do have one question.
Yes.
Thank you very much for first. Let me thank you very much for the very good presentation. We got the very good insight. One question from my side. You said that if there's no any article for your local content, it is really good. For example, assume if you are doing the background survey to highlight the problem statement, you need some informations, right? How we can get the information on that? I will specify. For example, assume, BTQM implementation in the tire industry, right? We don't have any articles related to Sri Lanka in here. In that case, in order to highlight the problems, right, what sort of sources that we can get from Sri Lanka?
Okay. Yeah. So I think I answered some little bit of a variant type of question. So the example you quoted is very good. Your starting point is international literature. So just because your research is in Sri Lanka doesn't mean that you should look for literature in Sri Lanka only, right? So you had from that same context, like, did you say bankrupt study? Oh, I didn't hear it. Sorry, can you repeat your research area? What's it?
I said that it could be TQM implementation in
TQM implementation. Okay.
Implementations in a specific industry, right?
Yeah.
Particularly specific industry.
Yeah. So TQM implementation has been researched for well over 50 years, I would say. Okay. So there's a lot of literature on TQM implementation worldwide. All right. So you have lots of sources of material, but the thing is, in applying that to Sri Lanka, that could be based on the experiences of other people and the contextual conditions, right? So it's like saying, so in implementing TQM, you could talk about the nature of labor in the country, the nature of funding in the country. So you can kind of you could present various economic literature in nature of funding. You could present labor type of literature in terms of this identifying the specific labor, the nature of labor in the country. So you could relate the context into the international literature and come up with your arguments. Okay.
Okay, Professor. Thank you. Thank you
very
much for
that insights. I mean, just to go a little bit deeper into your question. So there's another methodology that can be applied, which is called grounded theory approach, right? Grounded theory approach. So grounded theory approach is something that you use when there is no research has been done in that area internationally, worldwide, there's no research. So, for example, if you want to research in going to Uranus or something like that, the planet Uranus, okay, no one has research in that area. I mean, that's an example. So, I mean, there may be research already in that area, okay, although I'm not aware of it. So, if you want to adopt something where there's no research at the moment, no articles written in that area, then you apply what is known as grounded theory. So the theorists in that area are Glaser and Strauss. Okay, so if you read Glaser and Strauss, you'll be able to understand grounded theory.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you very much.
All right. Yeah, so that is usually the usual way of doing research is doing literature review, identifying the research questions, aim and objectives, and then designing your primary data, methodology, and things like that. But grounded theory means there's no literature in that area. So you can't do a literature review, no literature. If there's literature, it could be like 2 papers, right? So then you adopt what is known as grounded theory. And so Glaser and Strauss has introduced the process for grounded theory. I don't want to bring that up here, right?
Okay, thank you so much. That was a nice informative presentation and question and answer sessions was a good opportunity for our researchers. So I hope this session has not only deepened our understanding of how to conduct a critical review, but also reminded us that the way we handle knowledge defines the quality of our research. So on behalf of everyone here, I thank you, our resource person, our speaker, for his valuable contribution. Thank you so much, Professor. And all of you for your active engagement, dear researchers. And let us carry forward today's discussion into our own research journeys, transforming knowledge with both creativity and integrity. So let's meet next research launch. Goodbye all.
Thank you.